Hi, welcome back to the Healing You Show. I'm Vanessa Harris and I'm here with our host, Gloria Lybecker. And today we're going to be unpacking anxiety and depression.
Yes. Hi, Vanessa. Good to see you again. Those are some topics there or some experiences that I've been hearing a lot about lately. And so I thought it'd be a good one that we can maybe talk about and support our viewers to get a little more depth into that. Just even how to be with it.
Yeah, so I hear those terms used a lot. And I actually hear a lot of people being labelled or diagnosed with those. And but there's also a lot of misunderstanding or a lack of clarity, I guess, around it.
Yeah.
So how does anxiety and depression actually show up for people? Because I know it's different for every person, but how does that show up in people's lives and what does it look like?
Well, it can look like a variety of things, but the first thing I'd want to name is around anxiety. There's two different flavors of anxiety that run within our human circuitry. And one of them is in our fear circuitry. We can have anxiety, and it's a anxiety that is it safe in my environment. So it's all about safety, and we need that circuitry. We need that to be running in order to really stay present and safe. The other flavor of anxiety is in our panic grief circuitry. So I see that's the one that tends to run with depression, because there's the panic, grief / alarmed aloneness, or a sense of abandonment that can happen within us. And it could have happened at a very young age. And we might not be consciously aware of what's running in us. And we just have this experience that has been repeated. And so that kind of anxiety, it's more of a low frequency. It's a collapse in the self. And so there's an anxiousness that will be abandoned, or that will be alone, or that we don't matter, that we don't belong, that we're not included. And we can get really stuck and actually kind of frozen in that, and kind of not even realize what we're telling ourselves. And then it starts to pick out in our world. And depression, that actually can happen, and I've noticed it happen for myself. So we have 8 different circuits of emotion and motivation from Jung concept. And Sarah Payton has also identified a 9th one, which is the disgust circuitry. And so when we have our seeking circuitry going, that's when we're really getting hits of dopamine. We're enjoying ourselves. We're really engaged, and we are really like enjoying ourselves. We're seeking something out, going after something.
And what was that one called? What was that circuitry called?
Our seeking circuit.
Seeking. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And so when we're really, so that circuit gets lit up on me when I'm creating classes, when I'm creating content, and I'm just really envisioning it and I'm mapping it out, then I'm having so much fun with it. And if it gets blocked, that can feel like that collapse, because my seeking circuit gets blocked. Then I just go, oh. So depression can happen for people when they're just full on board, but maybe they're not balancing out their lives and they get burned out. And so then they fall into that lethargy. And it's really a painful fall from this high state to the plummeting down. And it hurts. It's physically painful.
So I really relate to what you're describing now. I have seen people close to me be really excited and engrossed in a project, particularly around organising parties or functions and things for people. And then after it finishes, they crash into a really strong depressive state, to the point that I didn't understand what was going on, but I used to almost go, no, I don't want you to get involved in organising that, because it's going to cause you to fall down. that's the way that I was perceiving it.
Yeah. And what's actually happening is sometimes I know for myself, when I get really involved in something like that, I forget to eat. I forget to do these. I don't attend to my self-care. And so because I'm so on with this, what I'm actually doing is I'm shifting left into my left hemisphere, and I'm actually leaving my body behind and not even noticing what I'm needing in my own system, because I'm almost like in a little fantasy place. I'm up in my imagination and I'm creating.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the importance of slowing down and actually having a practice at checking in with yourself. Checking in, well, how am I doing now? I'm really enjoying this, and how's my body doing?
Mm-hmm.
So not to leave our body behind.
And I'm guessing that this is the circuit that gets triggered when people are gaming or in those, yeah, and they can just completely forget all of their self-care, not notice that they're hungry, tired, and just keep on going and literally seeking in this virtual world and
Well,
attending.
and it can also be a way to deal with the pain of the depression, of the reality of what's happening, because part of what can happen, and this is a slight deviation, but our default mode network that we've talked about before, it's the thoughts, the patterns that happen behind our conscious awareness, and we can develop our ability to hear what we're telling ourselves. But that a lot of times is made up of all of our past experiences, of what we've been told we are instead of who we really are. And sometimes that's a real painful thing to have believed you are. And so but the default mode network can't stay operational when we have the thinking brain or the seeking circuit on. It shuts it off. So when we're gaming, it actually shuts that off, and then we feel good. So we don't want to stop that, because then we don't feel good again, because then that kicks back on. So when we can develop awareness of how amazing we are and the way we're created, we can begin to use different strategies to bring balance to our system,
Mm-hmm.
instead of making gaming wrong, because it's like, wow, no wonder you do that. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot better.
Yeah, relief. There's a relief,
Yes, there
I'm
is a
guessing.
relief in there. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's about understanding what's going on before that and then finding a different strategy.
Well, when we can notice what's going on, we can actually attend to what's the need under that. And we want to slow down and really get into what does it feel like in the body. And because it's painful, people want to leave it. So many times we have the erroneous belief, well, I'm just not going to pay attention to it. I'm just going to keep doing this because this feels better. And then we're not willing to slow down and do the work to actually come back to our full health and balance, because we don't want to feel the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So there needs to be an internal motivator to restore our sense of self, so that we have the freedom to be who we really are. And that's a whole different, so there's a huge chasm between what it's like to have this anxiety and depression it's like low frequency collapse, really painful, to, well, what would it be like, the possibility of having a sense of clarity and ease and really having confidence in who you are and enjoying your life, having joy in your life. And those are vast different paradigms, and there's a big chasm between, and people get scared. They don't know how to traverse that.
So they know, so it's they want those things, but it seems impossible or overwhelming, or just I don't know how to get there.
And we
And
need
so then
accompaniment.
right.
We need companionship on the journey. It's too much for our system to do it alone. And so then we need to be willing to be vulnerable and to allow another person to actually feel our experience, and so we can have shame about it. So heavy low frequencies that I want to hold with a lot of care and gentleness.
So when you
Because
talk about those low frequencies, are you talking about those heavy emotions and those that people perceive as really negative. And you mentioned grief in that, the grief circuitry, and sadness and pain. Other ones I've heard. Does shame fit into there? Into that?
Shame's at the very bottom. I think we've talked in the past about the research that has been done about the frequencies of emotions of the human experience, and at the top of the frequencies, at the top of that would be bliss, right? I mean, that's above joy even. And then at the very bottom we've got shame, which is right above death. I mean, so it's like a total. I'm not of value. If anybody really knew me, they'd leave me. And those are painful. When I was a young woman, I believed that about myself, that if anybody really knew who I was, they would have nothing to do with me. So I was always trying to figure out how to be something I wasn't, so that people would accept me. And what I've discovered is that when I have the freedom to be who I am, I can't get that wrong. And yet, for me to find my path back from that level of shame and depression, I needed to be willing to find some solid ground of trust in a relationship with another person that could accompany me to come back, because we need to come back the way we went in. It doesn't mean if we were traumatized that we have to be re-traumatized. We can work at the edges of those experiences so that there's always that sense of safety and choice in order to restore our sense of wholeness within.
I like the sound of that. So, because a lot of people don't want to, when I talk to me about anxiety and depression, go back and look at those events or traumas, because it's re-traumatizing. But what I'm hearing you say there is that if you work around the edges and it's done with the right kind of accompaniment, it's not about going back over and re-traumatizing. It's about relief.
It's not about the story. It's about actually allowing the body to have the sensations acknowledged and felt. And so if you can keep the container right around the sensations, and those can link to the emotional flavor and what's the need, we really don't need to even have the discussion about the story. You know, so sometimes there's elements that may need to come in, and that's okay, but always taking it very, very slow is so crucial, because we don't need to be in a hurry. Many people have what I would call a trauma pull, that when we've had a trauma, we want to get better and we want to do it yesterday.
Yeah.
And so we just want to get on with it.
Yes.
And it's because it hurts so much, we're scared. And when we can learn how to allow, because that shows up in our body as tension. And so when we can actually read that tension as allowing it to slowly learn, how do we drop our shoulders? How do we breathe deeper? How do we actually begin to relax into trust?
And this tension, is that part of what people would be experiencing as anxiety?
Yeah.
Okay. And you were mentioning that there was, I think you said 7 circuits, and you talked about the first one, the seeking circuit. I'm interested in the other circuits, and are they related to anxiety and depression as well or not?
No, the 2 of them are. There's the panic grief circuitry or / abandonment, and then there's the fear circuitry. And the fear circuitry is all about survival. Okay.
And so with you were talking about the seeking behavior, and there was a few circuits around on a similar level to that. I just want to go back and clarify, were they things that could also, you're explaining that when the seeking behavior is just overstimulated and we fall out of balance, that's when we then go into that collapse state?
No, thank you for the question. What it is, my best understanding, is when our seeking circuit is activated, our system is running on dopamine and it feels super great. We love it. And we might not want to stop because it feels so good. It's almost a high. And if something comes up and blocks it, it stops.
Right.
And then if we can't get it going again, then it's pain. And we plummet down from that. And that can go into a depression. It's a sense of loss. We've lost
Yes.
something. So it's a panic grief circuitry that's getting totally hit.
Yes. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. I experienced exactly what you're describing the other day. So I was on an absolute roll with creating a literacy program and completely absorbed in it with a great team. And then there was a meeting and things just went a little bit sideways and we lost some members, and it was like, is this going to go ahead? Is this going to move forward? All the momentum really got stopped.
Yeah.
And I did notice myself just drop into this real grief almost, and sadness, to the point that it concerned me. I remember thinking, what is this feeling? This is really intense. And that leads me to probably another question about how, like, my fear that comes up is when I feel those things, I don't want to get depression. I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to end up like people that I've seen that have, just fallen down and never picked themselves back up. Is that a common thing? What are the common fears that come up for people when,
I'm
not the only person who goes into that pattern?
No, you're not. You're not alone by far. No, we get worried that there's no way out. We can get really worried about it. So that's part of the anxiety. We can think there's something wrong with us. We think it's all about us, when we think it's all about us, lets me know that we've actually gotten pretty small inside.
Right.
Because a little child, everything is all about them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start taking everything and thinking it's all about us, there's an experience we probably had previously that is really also being, so it's like a kaleidoscope effect. They compound and build upon themselves. And so then it hits again now, then it also activates any previous time you've had that experience, which can add an extra punch. Unless you are aware and have grown your awareness to understand, and not just understand it intellectually, but it's really about embodying your experience, because so many people in our cultures operate out of here. They intellectualize everything, but how do they live it? How do they live it? Or do they live it? Do they just think it? And there's a vast difference between those two ways of experiencing life. One's more doing everything and thinking everything, and the other one is actually abiding in the moment and noticing what happens in that. And from that, in my experience, that's where empowerment truly comes from. Because we can become more congruent when we can actually, what's happening inside is what we're speaking.
Yes, yes. So when we're more connected to ourselves and more relational, then we can be more present, congruent with our values, and present for other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So which it makes me think too, when you were talking, we were talking before, and we were talking about the fear that comes up for me around that incident. What I noticed was how it impacted the people around me and my relationship. So my first instinct was to reach out and talk to a friend. Like, I'm feeling like these terrible feelings. I didn't want to do it on my own. I'm used to accompaniment. So I called a few different people, and the person I landed on is not someone who's very comfortable with heavy emotions. So how does it impact relationships? Especially if anxiety and depression is an ongoing thing, what happens for the people around?
Well, that depends upon, again, how much they have, I guess, matured in their understanding and their own tolerance of emotions they don't like, in being able to welcome them anyway and stay really present. Because as human beings, if something's uncomfortable, we want to go away from it. And so there needs to be a capacity that's grown within in order to stay present with those uncomfortable emotions, in order for there to be a birthing of what's possible out of them. And so when I'm experiencing low frequencies in my body that are really painful and are triggering past trauma, then I'm selective in who I reach out to,
Mm-hmm.
so that I don't spiral myself more, but that I'm actually supported in a process that allows healing to happen. Because in my experience, when uncomfortable sensations arise, it's a signal for me that something is ready to heal. When I'm willing to allow it and to give it the space it needs in order to do so.
Mm-hmm.
How is that for you to hear?
I really relate to what you were saying about being selective about who you reach out to, because I hear a conversation in the general community that's often just comes up, oh, there's a misunderstanding of depression and anxiety, especially for people who've never actually experienced anxiety or those physical anxiety symptoms. Oh, they just need to just get over themselves. They just need to pick themselves up. Just don't worry about it. Don't let this bother you. Why are
That's
you being so
obvious.
sensitive? It's like the person has a choice. Yeah. But it's
Awesome.
kind of like, stop being upset, stop being sad because it's making me feel uncomfortable, is
Exactly.
really what I think is going on. So it's just, or you just need to get up and get moving, or don't sit there and sulk, or
Yes.
that, yeah. So that was the information I got given, and I was like, oh wow, sulking, like, no. And then what you said about accompaniment and being selective, I think for me, having people in my life that are so good at tuning in and comfortable being with those feelings,
Mm-hmm.
when I come across someone who's not, it's kind of like a slap in the face.
Yeah, it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And,
a surprise.
and it's not something that I've ever had to actually, I've never been aware of before, but now it's like a conscious thing, as you say. Yes, choose who I share these emotions with,
Mm-hmm.
not just for myself, but for the other person as well.
Yeah,
Because, you know, if I know that they don't have the capacity
yeah.
to manage those feelings, then yes,
Well,
I will.
sometimes we don't know till we start have conversation, and then you can see it in their body and their face, um, and that's feedback. But we need to also be able to recognize it. And when we're in that anxiety and depression, we're not as available in that way because we're not as resourced.
I
Yeah.
was going to say it would be very hard. So it's easy when I'm in a comfortable state to think about that. But
Yeah.
when I'm in those moments, or when someone is in that state of feeling really anxious or really depressed,
Yeah.
if they haven't had the experience of slowing themselves down and
Yeah.
practicing, then it's hard to apply any logic.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I want to hold with a lot of care when there's someone that has, acute depression that's chronic. Um, it's really important that they get specialized care because it's nothing to toy with, for sure. It's very, very toxic to the whole human system. And when I've been around someone with that, I could actually feel a heaviness. I mean,
mm,
you could just feel it, and I would almost feel sick
mm-hmm,
because it would feel it to even be in their personal territory. So it's really important that whoever is holding that sacred space does have the capacity to stay resourced and not take on those energies.
mm. Yes, I can relate to that. Um, I mean, people talk about people having a good energy or feeling comfortable with them, but I've heard depression described as like a black hole,
Mm-hmm.
kind of sitting in the corner of the room or wherever that person with it is caught in that really deep depression, and it's like it's that draining, yeah, that heavy frequency is what you're describing.
Yeah,
So
and
yes,
it
I
is very
agree. It's
draining
very
on their
important.
soul. Yeah.
So
And
if so, what is possible then if people know that what they're wanting, that they know that they want joy, they know that they want ease, they know they want freedom from this anxiety.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's are those things possible? Like, how do you get? You've
Well, how
talked
do you
about
get
slowing
from?
down and accompaniment. Um,
Well,
or,
I would want to say that the very first thing would be to find a place that you feel safe, that you can be honest, that you can actually name your feeling. That because many times when people are running those frequencies of anxiety and depression, they can actually sense nobody wants to talk to them. So they can feel actually hopeless with it. And then you start to plummet down into despair. And so to find someone you trust, to find someone that you can reach out to begin a conversation, to begin to spark hope again, to have those little microseconds of it lifting, and to be able to, there's many practices that can come from that when you work with somebody that is experienced practitioner with this work is really important. So, but I want people to know when they do experience that they really do matter, and that they're a gift in the world, because each of us is unique in that way. And so I really encourage any of our viewers to feel free to reach out. You could even schedule a free consultation with myself. At my website, I'll put in a little plug there at healingyousanctuary.com, and you can get a 30-minute consultation, and I can help you to find resources in your own area if you're not in my area, or whatever needs to work. I just want you to know that resources are available.
Yes, and I'm really enjoying what you're saying about reaching out. It's not something you can just deal with on your own, is what I see on a frequent basis, hear on a frequent basis, and understand. And reaching out to someone who is well trained and has the capacity to support those things. There is a great deal that's possible, but it's not, there needs to be that step of reaching forward.
There needs to be a relationship of trust. Yeah, and I do this because I remember the brain in the palm of the hand. Well, if you flip your lid, and there's many ways, when we flip our lid, we can go into a hyperactivation, or we can go into hypo. And when we've gone into the anxiety and depression, we've lost our creativity sense of self, and we're hopeless. So we've gone downwards. And we need to have a surrogate prefrontal cortex that comes in and allows us to feel that it's possible again, that can stay with us. And so, yeah, I really encourage anyone that experiences that or knows somebody that is, to encourage them to reach out for some support.
And I'm loving hearing what you just said. If people know that they've got someone in their life experiencing anxiety and depression, and they don't know how to deal with it, or they don't feel they have the capacity to sit and be with those intense emotions, I'm guessing that one of the most valuable things they can do is to be a tool or a support to get that person to see someone else who is.
Yeah, to be a link.
Yeah, who has got the capacity. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a big one.
It is.
It's a big topic, and impacts a lot of people. So thank you for unpacking that. And I really enjoyed hearing how that fits in with the brain circuitry. So once again, I've had a lot of learning today and seen things from a whole different perspective, which I really enjoyed. And so I think our time's probably coming to a close, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Yeah, I'll give people a shout out one more time. To find that a link to have a conversation with me is at healingyousanctuary.com, and there's a little box where you can click and schedule a consultation.
And I would definitely encourage. Yes, and I can definitely say that would be a great place to start reaching out. Thank you for the resource.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Okay.